All right, y'all. For today, here's what you're going to do. The first thing you're going to do is y'all are going to hunt for signposts like you did with the first article. You're doing the exact same thing with a new article today, okay? So remember, I'm going to refresh you on this. You are looking for these four things, okay? The first thing you're looking for is numbers. So if you see any numbers that are either in number form or written form, you're highlighting those in yellow. Remember to highlight that. Let's see if I can. All right, I find one right off the bat. So if I want to do that, I would take my cursor, highlight the 17, go up to this little marker, and click the yellow, okay? So that's numbers. Then you're doing unknown words. So this is any words that the author thinks you know, but you don't, okay? So maybe you don't know what generation means. So if you don't know what generation means, you're going to highlight that in green. Go all the way through the article and do that. Absolute language is really like concrete words, okay? So words like all or every or everyone, okay? So things that like don't leave any wiggle room. If you find any of those, you're going to highlight them in red. And then quotes. So that's anything in quotation marks. So remember, quotation marks look like, let me see if I can find one. There we go. Okay, so this is a quote from a person. So quotation marks are these two little apostrophe marks that are right next to each other. So if you find one of these, you would take your cursor, highlight it, and you're highlighting those in blue. Okay, so that's the first thing you're doing. Please make sure that you share this article with me. I am taking these signposts for a grade today, so share it with me. All right, if you want this article read out loud to you, please stay on the screen. Don't click off the video. If you just want to read it aloud to yourself in your head, you guys can go ahead and stop the video and read it on your own. If you want it read, I'm just going to read it out loud to you so you can stick around. Living his dream, a new generation fights for rights King envisioned. When he found out Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated, Freeman Hrabowski felt that there had been a death in the family. In 1968, Hrabowski was a 17-year-old math-obsessed student at Hampton University. Hrabowski knew King better than most. As a 12-year-old boy, he marched to protest his city's rigid segregation of white and black students at schools. The schools with black students got old textbooks, and the buildings were in disrepair. There were endless reminders that the people in charge did not allow him full humanity. Hrabowski remembers King speaking at his family's church and saying that if the children marched for equal rights, the country would not turn away, testing itself against people in power. Something similar has been happening today. A new generation of young activists is testing itself against people in power. Several prominent black leaders of the movement for stricter gun laws emerged after the February 2018 school shooting in Parkland, Florida. Many are not yet old enough to vote. They include 12-year-old Naomi Wadler and 10-year-old Yolanda Renee King, King's granddaughter. Black Lives Matter is an activist-led movement. It is protesting against discrimination toward black people in the criminal justice system. The movement has chapters across the country. They draw much of their membership from activists in their teens and 20s. Continuing a tradition. Among them is 25-year-old Tiffany Burks. She's an organizer with Black Lives Matter in Broward County, Florida. Burks said that she sees her work as continuing a tradition set by King and other civil rights leaders. The type of organizer I am relies on shared wisdom from people who have done this work in the past, Burks said. She's inspired by King, as well as lesser-known leaders like Eula Johnson and Fannie Lou Hamer. Burks had long felt passionate about social justice. However, it was the 2016 police shootings of Alton Sterling, Michael Eugene Wilson Jr., and Gregory Frazier that spurred her to become a community organizer with Black Lives Matter Alliance Broward. When some 800 people turned out for the first action she organized, she felt certain she'd chosen the right path. Black Lives Matter provides crash education. Burks described her time with Black Lives Matter as a crash education in all the U.S. history omitted from standard high school courses. That included the history of Black feminist thinkers from the 1960s and 1970s and the role of youth in the civil rights movement. She's worked on a number of campaigns. One recent success was an effort to rename several streets in Hollywood, Florida. The streets, which ran through predominantly Black communities, had been named after Confederate leaders from the Civil War. After the Parkland shooting last February, Burks began working with Black student survivors who felt invisible in the national debate over gun control. She helped them organize a press conference last March. Students told reporters that, while mass shootings like Parkland produce national outrage, nothing similar follows police shootings of unarmed Black people. Individual gun homicides result in far more deaths than mass shootings and disproportionately affect Black youth, yet they receive a fraction of the attention paid to high-profile shootings. After the Parkland shooting, some people suggested plans like stationing police in public high schools. Such policies could make students of color feel even less safe, Burke said. A difficult but essential conversation. Instead, she suggested examining the complex factors underlying gun violence. Burke thinks that while white privilege and power in the United States are difficult concepts to talk about, the conversation is essential. Like civil rights activists 50 years ago, Burke sees children and teens as uniquely capable of sparking that conversation. Somehow, young people bring out the humanity in folks who might otherwise have been indifferent, she said. In Wisconsin, 15-year-old Alameda Caldart took part in a 4-day, 50-mile march for stricter gun laws last March. It was inspired by King's 1965 march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama. Caldart and the other marchers ended in Janesville, Wisconsin, home of former Congressman Paul Ryan. They aimed to call out Ryan's consistent opposition to gun control legislation. I'm tired of seeing all these lives being taken every single day due to the inaction of our elected officials, Caldart said. Opposition to gun control seems impossible to overcome. Still, Caldart takes inspiration from the civil rights movement. The activists persevered even when success felt impossible. They ultimately saw sweeping changes in U.S. laws. Today, Freeman Hrabowski is president of the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, UMBC. He sees parallels between King's struggle for civil rights and today's young activists. Picking up the slack. Young people are crying out and taking action because adults haven't done enough, Hrabowski said. Activists face many challenges. April 2018 marked the 50-year anniversary of King's death. The anniversary arrived as many key achievements of the civil rights era seemed weakened. A recent report from the Eisenhower Foundation warned of neighborhood and school resegregation. It also talked about how some white supremacists, those with the hateful belief that white people are better than people of other races, have become bolder. Still, Hrabowski is firm in his belief that the more challenges you face, the more you realize there is always hope. After the initial shock, King's assassination did not destroy Hrabowski's hope for a more just country. Hrabowski carried that hope with him. He started a career in education. He helped make UMBC the university that today produces more Black graduates with doctorate degrees than any other U.S. school. A doctorate degree is the highest level of academic degree and requires years of additional studies after college. Hrabowski sees his university, with its diverse student body, as the fulfillment of King's vision. To see kids of all races from around the world connecting together and focusing on ideas is exactly what Dr. King's dream was.